Welcome to the Homeschool Together podcast. Where one working mom and a stay-at-home dad help you navigate the nuts and bolts of the growing and dynamic world of homeschooling.
With a focus on early learners, like me.
All the ins and outs of building and maintaining your homeschool life.
Homeschool.
Find out tips and tricks to make things like this easier.
I'm reading.
And ultimately, enjoy educating your kids. And what's that last thing?
Have fun together. Did I do good, Daddy?
Yeah, you did, sweetie. Good job. Hello, and welcome back to the world's greatest secular homeschooling podcast on the planet. What? If you have a chance, you want to support that world's greatest secular homeschooling podcast on the planet, you can go ahead and click down below on the various links on our Gumroad page and a few other things. And we are working hard for you. We are working hard right now to build up all the biomes guides that we were using, taking everything what we did, putting it down onto paper, and providing that to you guys as well. We are working hard here through the summer, boiling hot summer here in Pacific Northwest. I think it's raining.
And if you're looking for curriculum for the fall, head on over to our website, homeschool-together.com, where we have a huge list of secular resources that you can look through and decide what you want to get for your child. And all those purchases go to help support the podcast.
Absolutely. All right.
Thank you.
Ariel, I make a prediction today. I'm going to predict by the end of this podcast, people are going to love this world's greatest secular homeschooling podcast even more. We're going to continue talking about reading comprehension and talking about inference and prediction as a skill for our young ones to learn that they can do through their reading. They can do before reading. We have a lot of pre-reading activities as well to do through prediction and inference. And we're going to talk about a number of those things, but just being able to have the knowledge and understanding of what is happening in the text, taking prior knowledge as well, whether it's from, pre-reading activities that we may have done with vocabulary, or setting the scope or the time period of what we're about to read, or pulling from past experiences or other stories and bringing that forward into our what we're doing in the moment. With respect to our reading comprehension, and being able to have those predictive, intuitive, predictive abilities to know what is coming in the story, and then also using those things and be surprised by a really good story that does something in a surprising but inevitable conclusion.
The best kind.
Always the best kind, surprising but inevitable. And being able to have those skills to go through the story is one of those first levels above being able to just regurgitate what happened in the plot, being able to take some of those understanding and those skills and be able to put that forward into kind of like a quasi-analytical capability. We're not asking our learners very often to do a lot of writing and whatnot thinking here, but we'll go through some activities that I've been using lately with my oldest, and things that I do verbally with my youngest to kind of do both of these skills.
Yeah, so last week we talked all about asking good questions and teaching our kids to ask questions. So that's kind of the first building block of this reading comprehension topic. And so the next big block is inference and prediction. So let's just get into first, what is inference? That's really taking what the text says and what the reader knows to figure out what's implied. So for example, she slammed the door and left without saying goodbye. So we can infer that she's upset about something, right? So this is something that kids often miss because they're really looking for explicit answers. They're looking for them to say,
Johnny was upset.
He slammed the door and left. Yeah. Whereas we're asking, this is part of developing emotional intelligence too. We did Torchlight Pre-K, and they have those cards. I think
Breathe Like a Bear.
No, not Breathe Like a Bear. That was the learning to calm themselves and stuff. No, it was the What Do You Feel? The EBU cards, right? I think that's what they were called. I don't remember. We'll put them in the show notes. But anyway, the point of the cards was there was a picture on it of these anthropomorphized animals who were in some sort of situation, and you were supposed to just look at the picture and you were supposed to infer what you thought was happening, right?
How did this person, and it even had, I remember, now you're describing it, they had context. Like sometimes there would be somebody talking really loud and the other person's kind of cowering.
Right. There'd be a rabbit sitting there holding a baseball, and behind them there's a bunch of other animals that all have a baseball and a bat, and they're all laughing and walking away, and the rabbit's kind of sad. So you're supposed to infer that the rabbit feels left out, right, of the game, for example. So it's a way to build emotional intelligence, and that's what inference can do in this case too when we're reading.
Well, it's actually like, there's, just to jump in there, it's requiring the learner to understand the subtleties of the language. And that's, I think it's very, you're right, like it's not explicitly telling them what to think,
Right.
but it's requiring them to have a deep vocabulary and understand that vocabulary and the way it's being used to, you're right, see the deeper meaning or the deeper inference of what's happening.
This starts with pictures, but of course we're going to be, graduating to once there aren't any pictures anymore. And this is something that's happening for our 6-year-old. Some of the books that we're starting to read to her don't always have pictures, or they do have pictures, but they're not on every single page. So she can't know by a picture every page exactly how that character is feeling about something. So this is an emotional intelligence building. It's also awareness of what you're saying, like the tone of what the writing is, and the reading depth of what we're supposed to get out of it. So this has got kind of a lot of facets, but that's why inference is an important piece, because there's so much written in subtext that we need to figure out based on all of these clues in the writing.
Well, and a lot of times I think maybe your genre of books, you tend to read a lot of romance. And like,
among other, I'm reading sci-fi right now.
I know, but a lot of times, like,
I read mystery.
But in the text, you're getting those subtle, the way they look or the way they move, the way they're
sometimes not so subtle, but
not
yes.
so subtle. Yes.
Yeah, no, it's true, right? You're trying to figure it out. I was reading some
the body movements and stuff.
Yeah,
and
I was reading some like cozy mysteries lately,
Yeah.
and those have like all of that kind of subtle stuff where you're like, was that look supposed to mean something here?
Yeah.
Why did they talk about how he walked over here? Maybe he was the killer? Like, there's all these things, right? Where you're trying to just really pay attention.
Was it one of the cozy cat mysteries where the cat finds...
There was no cat.
No.
It was cozy. It was like a cozy British mystery. I don't even remember. But yeah, you're trying to look at all of the layers of the writing and trying to figure out things. It's fun. It's a little bit like a mystery.
Well, it's hard to do that because a lot of times our young ones, especially the young ones, haven't had that much reading experience, haven't had that much life experiences, as much social, experiences where they can get those cues. And you're right, it's difficult. It's hard for them to see those things.
Yeah, absolutely. So if inference is about what's happening now, those kind of sublayers, then prediction is about anticipating what would be next. So we use clues from the writing to make a thoughtful guess, or sometimes it's a real wag about like some crazy thing our daughter thinks could happen at the end, and then a meteor comes and hits and blows up everybody. No, I don't think so. So like one of the examples that I found online, which I thought was cool, is like a mystery novel would describe a strange footprint, the prediction that a new suspect might appear, or maybe it's a red herring.
What is this red herring? Why is a fish involved in our story?
So it's really important for story structure and comprehension, right? It helps readers to hold on to different plot threads, especially when there's lots of different pieces going on. I was reading Harry Potter to our youngest, and that has, it's mostly around the main character, but there's a variety of different threads, right? We're reading Sorcerer's Stone. So she's got to remember... Yeah, she's got to remember the whole storyline about the stone, about the vault, all those pieces. She's remembering the storyline between Malfoy and Harry and the growing hatred between them. She's thinking about Snape and the three-headed dog and that bit of it. We've just got the Mirror of Erised, so she's also thinking about him and his family. And these are all these different threads, and they've got to kind of keep them all in their mind at once. And prediction helps us keep all those threads because we're trying to figure out how they're going to all tie up together.
Yeah, and I think, now that we know inference, now that we know prediction, I think the biggest thing for us when we're starting to teach these to our children, we're not going to explicitly say, all right, it's inference time or prediction time.
No.
Right? And this kind of keys in on what we talked about last week, which is the discussion, the talking, the interactions we have with our learners while we're doing the reading, while we're trying to bring out that reading comprehension. We need to model, and we need to model that through questions and through discussion, asking them, he keeps looking at the clock, why is he nervous? Is he nervous about something?
Right.
What do you think's going to happen? Right.
Why do you think they keep referring to the umbrella? Does that have some significance, do you think?
Yes.
Whatever it is. This builds anticipation.
It does.
And really engages us and our kids in what we're reading as well, because we're really starting to think about like, I'm always telling our daughter, like, things are rarely in a book for no reason. They're rarely even in a show, in a movie for no reason, because everything costs. It costs time on the screen. It costs words on the page. Nothing is just included for whatever, right? It's all meant to help build the world, or perhaps be foreshadowing something that's going to happen ahead, or right. There's always a piece of it.
I've been definitely getting the line lately. The oh my gosh, is he going to survive? Daddy's the main character. Of course he survives.
There's going to be a show sometime or a movie
wait.
that's going to be like, that is going to end poorly.
Yes.
Not for a while, probably, but.
Like the lawyer in Jurassic Park. Oh, he'll be fine.
Yeah. Anyone who's remotely mean in that movie is gone. So this is a great way we can use the questions we talked about last week to try to help model for our kids. And then we're going to try to give them the scaffolding to begin to ask those questions at their own level, right? So if we start with picture books, then, what do you think's happening? Can you tell what's happening? We were listening to our kindergarten teacher read a story to the kids on the last day, on graduation day. Yeah. And it was like, I don't know, a 10-page picture book. And it took 20 minutes to read this book because every page she was reading and she was like, oh, what do you think he's saying here? What do you think might happen to him next? The kids were so engaged because I was like, oh, that's the way to do it. Clearly, I'm in the presence of a professional. So if we start with that, we can really, ask those kind of questions. And then we can ask some guided questions like, what do you think the character's thinking right now? Or how do we know how they're feeling? And so, again, we're trying to infer based on what's on the page, and if there's pictures too, what those pictures show.
And understand the scaffolding element where you're trying to meet the learner, wherever they are, especially it can be very difficult. It can be very challenging. I know it's challenging for teachers in a room full of children. It can be difficult for us when we have multiple children who are, working, side by side, maybe have a couple of years apart. It's hard to ask those targeted questions that, can help the youngest one and then also help the oldest one. So that, if you struggle at this a little bit, or you don't feel like it's natural, it's not you. It's a difficult thing to learn and to be subtle and to ask those questions and be inquisitive without feeling like you're being patronizing.
Right. That can be a little bit challenging.
It can be a little bit of a challenge. So just understand that the scaffolding is an art. It is something you learn and you get better at it over time. So if you're just starting out, just understand that maybe ask ChatGPT or something to help you with some questions. If you don't know what to ask, or if you feel like you keep asking the same questions over and over, or if you see your learner starting to drift a little bit and maybe not understanding what's going on, just maybe try to do some pivots, get some good ideas online or through AI, and then to help you become
right.
to cultivate a better experience.
We talked last week when we were talking about asking questions as, this was a muscle building exercise, and it's not just for your student, it's for you too, to get more comfortable with this. One of the things that can be kind of fun when I'm reading to our daughter is, at some point, most of the books transition to some sort of a cliffhanger element at the end of the chapter, right? Because they want you to continue reading. And that's a great point where we stop and we're like, oh, well, we're only reading one chapter right now or whatever. And the girls are like, no. And that's a great opportunity to say, well, what do you think's going to happen? Yeah. What do you think's going to happen next? And they're like, no, keep reading, right? So there are some natural breaks. You can also do it when there's some sort of a theme shift, or a character arc really changes, like a character has an emotional breakthrough or something. Big movements in plots. Those are great natural points to be like, oh wow, I did not see that coming. What do you think is going to happen next? Right? And kind of just be curious and engaged with it too.
Yeah, and also talk about using Post-its and journals. I think you talked about last week or maybe earlier to talk about journaling. I have this with my daughter, with my oldest. We've got our little spiral bound journal, and she is asked to write questions and asked to answer questions all the time on what we're reading in that journal. Write a quick sentence, 7 or 8 words. No repeating lists. I think I've talked about that before.
She loves lists.
She loves lists, especially if there's lots of characters. She says, all these people ran. I'm like, you are just like me. And
but writing can be a nice way if they don't feel comfortable talking about it.
Exactly,
right?
yeah. But it's another way for you to get the same level thing, but in a different medium and in a different way. If you're trying to get your student to write a little bit more, you can take your inference and your prediction actions and move them to a journal or Post-its.
Yeah, and the goal of the questions that you ask, it's not for them to be right, it's for our students to be engaged. So even if they're coming out of left field, then you can probe, like, why do you think he felt that way? What clues, maybe they're picking up on something that you didn't see, right? Or something that, they interpreted it differently. So it's all just to spark discussion. But just like asking, general questions, when we're trying to do inference and prediction questions, just keep it fun. One thing I saw online, which I thought was really fun, is like a Post-it board of all the possible endings that you think could happen. So as you read through the book, or this would be especially great if it was a mystery.
Tearing off different ones.
Right. Yeah. Like what's, the prediction parking lot. I thought that was really fun. Or like a clue board. So if you are reading anything that's a mystery, when you come across what the kids think might be a clue, you write it down on a Post-it, you put it on the board. Later you see which things were important and which were just red herrings. You can do alternate endings you talked about, which is kind of fun. So there's lots of ways to keep it fun and loose, and maybe you have your own ideas, but there's a lot of great things online that I thought were just fun.
A couple other things that I use as well is analyzing title, the book, the front image of whatever the short story is.
You do chapter titles too sometimes, right?
Chapter titles. And then a lot of times I will have my learner do a little bit of either pre-reading, inference and prediction on, what you think is going to happen in the story by just looking at the image and the title. I do this with my oldest a lot of times with whatever story we're doing. And then I have her stop midway. And I'll say, okay, stop on page 48, right? And then I want you to answer this question that I've written. What do you think will be the ending of this story? What do you think will be, I have her ask, isolate, like, what is the problem of the story? What is the challenge of this character? Very often I have her actually write a couple things. I go, Nate, I want you to write every character that you see and list every setting that the book, the story takes place in. And then I want you to list the problem, and then you're going to stop on this page. And then when you're stopped there, I want you to then write a prediction. And I want you to write a sentence on what you think will be the ending. And at the very end, and then I get her back in the story and go ahead and finish that story. And then I have her write what was the final solution and how did it differ from your prediction?
She is so proud of herself when she gets it right.
Yep.
When she correctly guessed.
She calls it, yeah.
When she calls it, she's like, she'll run up and show me, Mom, look. I called it.
And then
it's very funny.
And then once you do a reading like that, then I have her a lot of times we'll come back through and do some fluency activities and stuff as well. And then maybe diving into like a very important point of the chapter, so I can have her read for speed, and then have her write some additional activities on inference. So rereading the same story and see if they can get some more depth from that story. Don't pass on doing rereadings of whatever activities.
Yeah, if it's short, obviously.
Yeah, this is, for example, I tend to do a lot of this with our All About Reading curriculum whenever we're doing the readers. I know that she knows that those are stories for the curriculum and for learning. So I tend to take advantage of those as breeding grounds for activities like this. And I try to not do those type of activities for things that are more pleasure reading, because I want to like split that up. I say, okay, these are where I'm teaching you skills here that I want you to learn. I don't want to impact your enjoyment reading, because, you're still a little bit of a reluctant reader, and I don't want to hurt and hamper that.
We're always careful.
I want us to work here, or I have her in certain activities, and I try to segregate those to do that. And then if I want her to do something new, I do it in that type of reading as opposed to her more enjoyable reading, because I'm not reading along with her in that. So I don't really know what questions to ask other than like I just ask, what's going on in the Babysitter's Club?
Well, we ask general things like, she's reading a lot of the Babysitter's Club graphic novels right now, which she's extremely happy with. And it's been great because it's one that we don't even have to ask her to read. She just goes and reads by herself because she's so excited to see it. But because the title, Christy Saves the Day or whatever,
Yeah, right.
Even looking at the cover image and stuff, I'll ask her some questions about, what's happening. Christy looked really mad on the cover. How do you think she was feeling? And she's like, oh, well, let me tell you about what happened, and so she'll go into the whole thing.
Yeah, right.
And, it's clear that I can tell that she's read it. And then through her telling me about the plot, I can find other questions to ask, even though I didn't read that book, where she's like, well, Christy was really upset because her sister did this thing. And I was like, wow, how would you feel if your sister did something like that? Right? So you don't necessarily have to be the one reading it in order to be able to come up with questions.
You're right. It becomes more challenging when we're actually, our children are off doing their own reading.
And you haven't read that story.
Yeah, it's like, when do we have the opportunities to test them in these capabilities and check if they're doing a good job in this? We got to choose different texts. We got to choose different stories. We
can use ChatGPT, right? We can ask it for the main plot points, of this story. And it is easier when you're reading it to them or with them, but we can still do these same exercises with other things, even if we're not reading them.
Absolutely.
So overall, I hope that was helpful. Just kind of a rundown on inference and prediction. I know it seems kind of like, well, we talked about questions last week and these are just more questions, but it's a lot of questions when we talk about reading and reading comprehension, because we're trying to get our kiddos to think critically. Yep. And the next piece of this is having really meaningful discussions and narration. So it's the vocalizing part of all of it. Yeah. So we'll go over that next week as kind of the next building block in our reading comprehension series. And we hope that this is all helpful for you. So this week, try out some inference and prediction questions with your learner and let us know how it goes. Thanks so much for joining us today and making us a part of your homeschool journey. Please engage with us on social media. Join our Homeschool Together podcast group on Facebook and find us at Homeschool Together Podcast on Instagram. We'd love to hear your feedback, questions, and recommendations. Until next time,
Happy homeschooling!